We just had a warm handoff to the landing team, the EDL team. This team has been through a lot. The Perseverance Rover, we're here for Today in Space. We've got a lot to cover and a lot to get to here. So let's start the stream. Thank you for joining us. This is Today in Space. Welcome to Today in Space. I am your host, Alex Girofanos, your space podcast host from the East Coast. If you're just checking in on the audio afterwards, we're waiting here for the Perseverance landing on Mars. This is Mars2020. If you're watching us, we have NASA's eyes. This is their program. I saw this years ago, and it's so cool. I just saw this. We are watching an animation of what is happening in our universe and in our solar system. And right now on Mars, we're watching the animation of this spacecraft coming in. This is the Perseverance rover inside there. It's going in through the atmosphere. It's entering in, and we're here. We're here for your questions. We're here to hang out. And please let us know in the chat if you're hanging out. I'm going to pull up my phone here. But we were just listening to the entry and descent team hand off the reins over, or handing the reins over to them as they're in charge of the mission now. This is where they are. The Perseverance spacecraft, hey Mick, what's going on? It's actually going to look down at Mars, at all the data that they have from the orbiters of what it should look like, what they plan the mission for, and it's going to use those pictures to see if is there any changes. Has the terrain changed? Can we not land there anymore because it's not safe? This is one of the amazing things that the Perseverance rover is going to be different from Curiosity, right? Curiosity did a lot of great things. It's kind of the stock portfolio. It's the stock model of what the stock version of what Perseverance is. But Perseverance comes with so many different things on board. It has, 23 cameras on board, and 2 of them are on the Ingenuity helicopter that are in its belly. It's trying to land inside of Jezero Crater, which we 3D printed. We'll show you right here with our AG 3D printing lab, with our 3D printing lab, AG3D. And this is terrain taken from the orbiters, and we 3D printed it. Took like 68 hours, 800 grams of filament. But this is only a portion of the 28-mile wide diameter Jezero Crater that they chose because it's of scientific interest, right? There's an ancient lake bed from what we've observed. So when there was water in the past, when it dried up, when the magnetosphere of the planet ripped away and then the atmosphere blew away and it dried everything up, this is where remains of life would have been. That's why it's so important. But it's insane, isn't it? Thank you, Mick. We're gonna pull up the audio just so we have it in the background because this. Okay, they're talking about other things here. So we're waiting for confirmation. 3:55 is when this is landing. So while I'm not sure if this is quite live from NASA TV, we're going to make sure we're live here. Hey, it's Emily. So folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us here. We've got a little while here. We're here to answer questions, hang out.
I'm excited about space, and I think it's the same reason that many others are excited about space, and it's that the people in the space industry work to answer 2 of the biggest questions that humans have ever asked.
If you're in chat, let me know how the audio is.
And where did we all come from? And by sending a rover to Mars, we are gaining evidence for the answers to these questions, more evidence than we ever had before, and I think that's so exciting.
So folks, if you are just joining us, we're hanging out here. We had the simulation of the Mars landing here. Thanks to NASA's eyes. This is online. This is free. This is something anyone can look at. You can go throughout periods of time. I remember back when the Pluto mission, New Horizons, was flying by, I had actually aligned the view of what the New Horizons spacecraft would be like if it past Pluto on its flyby and looked right back at Earth. And it's just cool to have this kind of option to go through, to actually be able to have a view of what it's really like out there. If we go live, if we look at the live view of what's going on, they are still at the point where the spacecraft is still connected to the lander. So if we zoom in here, this is what I love about this. We zoom in here, this is our spacecraft. This is Mars2020. Our solar panels here are what's been providing power for the mission, guidance, navigation, control, relays. This has been what's gotten us to this point. There will be a separation here soon where they're going to separate that, and as we were watching before, the heat shield is going to take a lot of the force, the heat, and make sure that things go good as they hit 12,000 miles per hour to go down to 2, right? So that heat shield is super important. The parachute, obviously, the hypersonic parachute is a big deal. Dave, Jake, what's going on? Thanks for joining us, guys. Feel free to, again, let me know you're listening in the chat, ask any questions. We're just taking a look at the spacecraft as it's making its way towards entry. So this is the live view. Again, this is a simulation of what's happening. We've got the NASA TV broadcast there, and we'll turn to that audio in a little bit. But like I said, this is a hangout, so hit us up in the chat. There's a few things that I want to talk about again that I thought were really interesting. The actual landing. So it takes 11 minutes by radio for anything going back and forth from Earth or Mars to happen. So when they talk about that 7 minutes of terror, a lot of that is because it takes, like, this landing will happen quicker. It takes 7 minutes for the spacecraft to go from the atmosphere to the ground. So going from that 12,000 miles per hour to 2 and touching down, that's 7 minutes. That's how fast this is. And so it literally takes less time for it to land than the actual data would be to come back. So by the time we get the data back on Earth, everything will have happened. It'll already be in the past because it has to travel that far, even at light speed. So just talking about the pure scale of what we're dealing with here, space travel is not easy. Getting to this point wasn't easy. Hey, Scott. Hey, is this a good place to say that my son is a rocket scientist for NASA? That's great, Scott. Congratulations. That's awesome. That is the holy grail of aeronautics, aerospace. That's great. Do you know what team he works for? What he's doing? That sounds awesome. But space isn't easy, right? Going to Mars is not easy. Curiosity, when it landed last time, did this skycrane maneuver for the first time. It was insane. Like, literally looks like the Green Goblin's hoverboard. I know there's probably some technical people that are going to get angry about me making that comparison because the hours and toil and all the stuff they had to do to make this work right automatically on Mars, it probably diminishes the point. But I think it's that's what it looks like to me. This is all going to happen automated, and there's no way to press stop, or there's no extra life. There's no game over, click retry. You get one shot at it, and there's been a lot of fantastic failures in just landing. Thank you, Mick. I appreciate that. But this is very difficult, and it's not guaranteed that this is going to work. There's still a chance that this may not work. But when you think about the name of the mission, right, Perseverance, that especially after the last year, they launched this in the middle of a pandemic. They had to change everything up from what they were doing. They weren't able to do things how they were going to do, and even if they did it in the old way, in the old world before the pandemic, it still wasn't guaranteed. So they threw up all the cards on the table, had to change up working from home, and still make sure that they would all get that, like, everything still goes right? They still have to double check all their math. They have to make sure that everything is running properly and that they've accounted for other things that are happening so that everything goes well. That's how detailed and precise and accurate all of this has to be. Let me look at the chat here. Scott, he's in Huntsville. To something with getting rockets out of our atmosphere with the least amount of damage to the components. That is a very unsung hero job. You know, everyone just expects that a rocket is gonna launch into space without things breaking on the way up. I remember when I was getting my aerospace engineering degree, because I actually am an aerospace engineer for anyone that's new. I've got the debt, but not the job. So there's that. But I do know what I can help find this information, and what I like to do is to break it down so it's not super technical. But from what it sounds like, Scott, from what your son does, there is so much stress just launching from the ground and getting to space. The vibrations that happen when a rocket is going up into space and getting through the atmosphere, it is not easy. We're not supposed to just be able to do it. We've designed things to allow us to do that. That's why the multi-stage rockets were created, right? Because if you just used one rocket and used all the fuel, and you never lost mass, like you never lost pieces of the rocket as you went up, we couldn't, based on the gravity we have on Earth, get into space. Like if our gravity was a little bit more, we wouldn't be able to build anything that would get us out into space. Mars is great because it's less gravity, right? So you require less to leave Mars and come back to Earth. But yeah, if we weren't able to leave Earth's gravity, none of this would be possible. And I can already hear I can already hear my friend Dave saying we just need a space elevator, and then all our problems will be solved. And space elevators would be great, Dave. I agree. That's a lot of rambling for me. Again, let me know in the chat if you got any questions. Scott, I think your son's job is awesome. Being I've been thinking about this lately. Being an engineer in general, being in the hard sciences, in the aerospace industry especially, there were a lot of jobs. There were a lot of jobs that I just wouldn't have been happy or enjoyed myself, or the amount of effort it takes for all of these engineers are stressed right now. They're not cheering, they're not excited. They are super hyper focused on making sure that this mission goes well. They know all the ways it can go wrong, and they know there are plenty of other ways they've never even thought of that things could go wrong. So you need to go through all the trial and tribulation to have a successful engineering career or whatever in the hard science you're trying to do. You really got to love what you're doing. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of people in STEM, and why there's so many people that start in STEM and leave is because the position they were in just didn't fit them. It didn't fit their passion and the amount of effort and work and emotional toll it takes to work with critical people. I'm kind of on this search to talk to people who work in all these different areas of science and technology and engineering, so that people can get a better idea of all the different ways that they could get involved in science if they're interested, right? You don't necessarily need to have the NASA job, and it's awesome that your son Scott has that. The reality is there's literally not enough jobs to fill all the people that are actually qualified to come in there. And there are a lot of companies. I mean, there's like SpaceX is one of those companies. We follow them very closely here on the podcast because they have some of the most exciting jobs in aerospace that are available. It's new technology. It's never been done before. That's what the early space race for NASA was. That's why it was so exciting, is because no one had been to the moon yet, right? So building that stuff, being a part of the team to figure out how you do that for the first time. That's the holy grail for a lot of engineers, especially rocket scientists, especially aerospace engineers. So the more and more companies that can start and find people that both love it and are good at it, I mean, if we can enable that kind of people, then we can do a lot of crazy stuff. Like landing an SUV-sized rover with a computer that can guide itself on the surface, a microphone, 23 cameras, a little helicopter in its belly, and set aside samples for another mission to come back and bring them back to Earth. That's perseverance. That's what we're here talking about. Yeah, Scott, that's a great point. Yeah, Scott says here in the chat, I think it's a big deal that you guys have to understand the physical science and can't just rely on computer models. that is like the fundamental like theory versus practice. My alma mater, the place I went to college, that was literally like our theory and practice. It was about those two aspects. I think a good phrase that a lot of people talk about, T-Laps. What's up, man? Tyler, welcome. Welcome. Theory and practice. Those two things, like the rubber meeting the road, like that's when you get into the engineering and the applied engineering, not just the theoretical science, but the engineering stuff, what's real? Like you've got this idea, you try it, it doesn't work. Then you've got to figure out how do you make it work the way you want to, or it doesn't work the way you thought it was going to work. That is the complexity of engineering in the real world. Mick asks a question. I don't think it's dumb. How do they come up with the names of these things? For these missions, that's a very good question. This mission I think was named. It was a contest they had from students, and they wrote essays, and Perseverance was chosen. I think they had the two people that sent in their names for both Perseverance and Ingenuity, the helicopter that's in the belly of Perseverance. They got to go to the launch and actually see it there, so that was pretty cool. I don't remember their names, but for this mission, that's how they did it. There's a lot of times, like Maven, for instance, which is one of the satellites that's at Mars that launched in the last few years. A lot of these are like, they're just anagrams, like they're names they make up. I think that's the right word. But they'll just come up with a name, and if it makes a word that's easy, that's what they'll do. But it's usually something very technical. I wish there was a better answer to that, but everyone does it differently, and for the longest time, there wasn't any art to it. It was just, can we just add a bunch of letters in a row that are technical and make it work? So I think there should be a whole team that decides these names. It's a creative position. I mean, that's another thing when we talk about people working jobs in STEM that aren't super technical or super engineering. A lot of engineers are not good at creative stuff. If you've worked with engineers, you know this is very true. There are analytical people sometimes that are all analytical and too literal that the creative stuff doesn't come out. And if you can get someone that can work with that analytical person to extract the stuff that really makes a difference and communicates it well, that is a beautiful relationship. And that kind of person doesn't have to be the smartest person in the room. They just have to be able to communicate better. Which for right Tyler, right? It's true. I mean, there is definitely a certain type of person that becomes an engineer, and that does not necessarily mean they're creative. So if we can get more creative people to work with the engineers and the nerds, we'll be better off. All right. So we've got our separation of the spacecraft that helped get Perseverance to this point, and now the spacecraft is going from cruise stage separation to entry, descent, and landing. This is where everything gets a little bit more complicated. But this is what they've been preparing for, right? The spacecraft is going to come in. Again, we're using NASA's eyes here. The heat shield, we're going in belly first. Heat shield is going to protect the spacecraft, the rover, and the skycrane from all the heat that it's going to take from going from 12,000 miles per hour to the point where it needs to release the parachute. And then that'll bring it down to 2 miles per hour. So that's what we're Lehrer und Kunst. That's what we're looking for here. And Mick, yeah, you should do it. I think we need to get more people like you involved with the STEM fields. Okay, so we're gonna go back to the mission audio here. Let me know if you guys can hear the audio. Jake, you're hilarious. Woo! Super Science Space Truck has reached the boss level.
It's turning itself in the direction of facing the heat shield toward Mars, and will eventually hitting the top of the atmosphere. We're not far away. This is going to go very quickly from here on out.
Woo! All right, I want to switch over to the NASA TV. We're watching basically the same thing at this point, anyways. Oh, so that's pretty cool. So remember how the separation from the cruise stage came out? The cruise stage got in the way of the reception from Earth. That's what they were talking about. It's a little quiet. Okay, thank you.
The data stream indicating the cruise stage
Is that better?
separation. We have confirmation that the vehicle has started warming up those entry thrusters. Warm-up pulses have begun.
All right, switching over to viewing mode.
At this point, the spacecraft is trying to stop its spin from the cruise 2 revolutions per minute down to 0, and then will turn to its desired orientation from entry. It will separate the two balance maps that has kept it balanced during all of cruise.
All right, so I got a question from Mick here. Guys, let me know if the audio got better from the video. I'm still trying to figure a good way to do this. Mick asks, as the movie guy in this bunch, when do you think a manned mission will land on Mars? That's a really good question. If we wait for the moon to Mars plan that NASA has, you're looking at 2040, 2050 at the earliest, and that's if everything goes well. With SpaceX and Starship, I think that they would like to do it by 2026, but I think 2028 would probably be the first time that you get enough people that are willing, have trained enough to go for a one-way mission. And the thing that Starship helps you do is that you're also your shelter once you get there, right? Let me grab this while we're here. Oh boy. Okay. That was unplanned. Okay. So Starship can bring up to 100 people. This is our 3D printed model, everyone. Here you are. So this can come in, land on Mars. You can live in this structure, have enough food to last you a little while. Again, once you get there, that's 2 years you got to be there. So if you only send 4 people and all the other room that you would have the 100 other people that could live on Starship, maybe you bring enough food that you could actually live there. But you also got to be prepared for the fact that if in that 2 years you're not ready to go back, it's another 2 years before you can launch back. So every time you miss on your way back from Mars, it's 2 years. So that is the most difficult part about this whole going to Mars thing. The moon, you can be back in a few days. You know, that's why we need to practice on the moon. That's why I follow the guidance that we need to practice on the moon for this stuff. So that way when we're there, even if we miss the return back, we still have the opportunity, we have the infrastructure, we've trained to live in an environment like that long term. So it's tough, but I hope that answers your question, Mick. I have a book I would definitely recommend, Robert Zuber, and this is an older book, but it's still very, very relevant today. If you want an aerospace engineer's honest to God truth of like, how do we go to Mars with the stuff we have today, this goes through everything. I'm still reading it. The Mars Society creator, if you're familiar, the Mars Society is about getting the first people to Mars. If you're not aware of them, definitely check them out. If you're interested in some more science stuff, I have Avi Loeb's Extraterrestrial, which is a scientist's perspective on extraterrestrial life, and I would highly recommend that as well. Hi Sharon, welcome. You're welcome, Mick. All right, let's get this audio back up and running.
Perseverance continues to report heartbeat tones, indicating everything is nominal.
All right, so those heartbeat tones, folks, is just like a ping back and forth, so that it's our way of knowing that the rover's still alive. So one of the things that's going to happen when this rover starts coming in for its landing, during that breakdown, there's a chance we may lose those heartbeat tones. We may lose the communication cutout, but that doesn't mean that it's still a failure. There's a lot of different things going on. They're using one satellite, the MRO, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, to kind of piggyback doing this bent pipe maneuver to keep constant communication with Earth while it goes through. So the satellite's at Mars, pinging with the rover as it lands, and then pointing back at Mars. That's trying to keep our communication the whole time. And then the MAVEN orbiter is recording all the data during that landing so that we'll get a full file in case there's any blips back to Earth afterwards. Tyler says here, for the moon, it's 1/6 the gravity on Earth, right? So what's the difference in the gravity between Earth and Mars? What kind of impact would that have on the human body on Mars for 2 years? So that's a really good question, Tyler. So Mars's gravity is greater than the moon's. I think it's roughly 40%, but I usually say a third of Earth's gravity. What they've been doing on the International Space Station for a very, very long time is developing a program to reduce the effects that happen from zero gravity. So in microgravity, zero gravity, they're able to keep up with the bone loss. They're able to keep up with their hearts and the change in blood flow, right? Because without gravity, the flow isn't being circulated by gravity, like down to our feet and kind of being pushed through. So our heart just kind of has to keep the rhythm going. Once you're in 0G, there's nothing like your heart works differently, right? The flow is completely different. People's heads like get inflated because it all gets stuck here. Their sinuses get full and all that. So with a third gravity, you should be okay. What we apply from the ISS could definitely work. I think the biggest challenge, I think we can get around that. I think the biggest challenge is being developed as a human being in that environment, because if you develop as a baby, as a fetus, and then grow in an environment that's less gravity than Earth, then your bones are going to develop to that gravity. They're going to develop to that pressure, and your body will then have a harder time adjusting to Earth's gravity. So it's creating an environment that will allow development of a human being for a higher gravity so that they can survive lower gravity. That's, I think, one of the biggest things that's going on here. Good. I'm glad, Mick. I'm happy to hear that. This is what I like to do. All right, let's go back to the audio. Again, this is some of the most stressful... Okay, atmospheric entry is in a minute, folks. We're here.
1 minute.
This is it.
From entry interface.
This is it. All right, the team focused on their computers. We're here with NASA's eyes, checking in. This is it, folks. This is the moment we'd all been waiting for. Landing in Jezero Crater. This is our 3D printed portion of that 28-mile wide crater that they'll be landing in.
We're about 30 seconds from entry interface. Perseverance is going about 5.2 kilometers per second and is about 190 kilometers altitude above the surface of Mars.
Woo.
Confirm your jet data flow.
Oh boy.
About seconds from entry interface. 5.3 kilometers per second and an altitude of 150 kilometers from the surface of Mars.
All right, folks, again, once we enter the atmosphere here, the rover has to shed 12,000 miles per hour that it's going to hit going in, down to 2 before it lands.
They have confirmation of entry interface.
Okay, here we go.
5.3 kilometers per second at an altitude of about 120 kilometers from the surface of Mars.
All right, I'm nervous. Folks, if you have any questions while we're watching here...
Is now waiting until it begins feeling the atmosphere of Mars slow it down. Once there is enough atmosphere, it will start controlling its path to the landing target.
Yeah, that's one of the craziest thing about this re-entry, right? So it's coming in, it's using the heat shield to take up all that heat, and then it's got thrusters, and it's going to start reorienting itself and guiding itself to where it needs to go, right? I mean, just look at this, right? So we're taking in some heat from the atmosphere. We're starting to go in. This right here is where they're heading. So if we just look straight at it, right? Like, it's not directly focused at it. So it needs to do adjustments as it makes its way into the landing site. This is Jezero Crater here, an incredible scientific location to look for, but all of those things, the terrain, the the soft sand, the cliffs, the rocks. All those are great places for science, but not great places for rovers. So there's a chance it could land in a place it can't get out of, right? That would be terrible. So it has on board this guidance system that's going to compare what it has known images of Mars, and it's going to overlay the ones that are there in case the terrain is changed in a way that's not ideal. And it's going to make movements along its way down, and it's going to use radar to actually be able to make guidance and decisions as it chooses. Because once that sky crane comes down, it has the option to move around if it has to, and it's going to find a good place to sit down.
In the atmosphere to control its distance to the landing target.
Welcome everybody to the Mars mission hangout. Again, if you're just joining us, my name's Alex Arfanos. I'm your podcast host, Space podcast host from the East Coast. Hit us up if you have any questions in the chat.
Heading alignment, which means Perseverance is no longer trying to control the distance to Mars, to the target on Mars, but instead is flying straight to the target.
This is what we're looking at, folks. There's that Maven orbiter that's recording everything as it comes in. So this is making connection with the spacecraft so that we can get a full recording afterwards. All right, it looks like the parachute has deployed, or should deploy at this point. Let's get confirmation from the actual team. So this is, right?
About 550 meters per second at an altitude of about 15 kilometers from the surface.
This is a great example of why shit never works the way you think it's going to work. That's why engineering is difficult, right? According to the simulation, this should already have happened. But things don't always work the way you think they're going to work.
Where the spacecraft will jettison the entry balance masses in preparation for parachute deploy and to roll over to give the radar a better look at the ground. The navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed, and we are seeing significant deceleration in the velocity. Our current
Here we go.
velocity is 480 meters
And again,
per second at
remember,
an altitude of about 12 kilometers from the surface of Mars.
Remember, this has to come back 11 minutes from Mars. So this has already happened. We're just getting the feed of what really happened. So this could already have landed.
Subsonic speeds, and the heat shield has been separated. This allows both the radar and the cameras to get their first look at the surface. Current velocity is 145 meters per second at an altitude of about 9.5 kilometers above the surface.
All right, here we go. So again, parachute is bringing the speed down from 12,000 miles per hour, right? They're already a lot of the way there. The next step here is for the sky crane to move towards the north, which is either forward or backwards, so that when it fires, it doesn't hit the rest of the spacecraft that's still on the parachute.
Velocity is about 100 meters per second, 6.6 kilometers of the surface.
I'm going to stop explaining things because I'm missing.
Perseverance is continuing to descend on the parachute. We are coming upon
Guys, we are very close.
The initialization of terrain relative navigation and subsequently the priming of the landing engines. Our current velocity is about 90 meters per second at an altitude of 4.2 kilometers.
All right. Oh, we're getting close. We're waiting to hear about the sky crane.
The system has produced a valid solution and part of terrain relative navigation.
All right, so that's confirmation that the computer actually found a place it wants to land. So now it's got to make...
Current velocity is 83 meters per second at about 2.6 kilometers from the surface of Mars. There's confirmation that the back shell has separated.
Here we go. We're in sky crane mode, folks. Sky crane mode.
Velocity is about 75 meters per second.
Green Goblining into the red planet.
Off the surface of Mars.
Here on 50 Bravo.
This is This is where it is. The last time Curiosity did this, it did it so well. The rover was a little bit too high. It like had negative. It lifted up. It was like they overestimated. It was beautiful. So fingers crossed. I don't want to jinx anything.
Accordion, which means we are conducting the skycrane. About to conduct the skycrane maneuver.
It's moving around. It's gonna.
Earth tones,
All right, that's okay.
as expected.
Earth to Earth tones lost is okay.
Skycrane maneuver has started.
Here we go. We're coming in, folks. This is it.
20 meters off the surface.
20 meters off the surface. This is it. Jezero Crater.
MRO.
All right. MRO is our beacon.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance.
Yeah! Woo! Damn! Perseverance, baby! Yeah! Congratulations, Perseverance team. In the middle of a pandemic. I'm blowing out the mic. I apologize. I'm excited.
Perseverance is continuing to transmit direct through Mars orbiter to Earth.
I can't explain how difficult it is to not only land on Mars, but to have to throw all the cards up in the air. When you launch, they launched this in the pandemic. Everything they had planned for had to change. They did it, dude.
Reports they're still getting telemetry from the lander.
Oh my god. All right, so connection is live. They did it. Wow.
We got it.
Touchdown confirmed. We're gonna wait for the images.
Wow.
This is so exciting.
They also have a microphone on board, so we're going to be able to listen to this landing for the first time.
Stay tuned. We might get some pictures.
This is the most cameras of any deep space mission, so we're going to get a ton of stuff from Perseverance. Congratulations to NASA, to the JPL team, to the Perseverance team for, not to be lame, but persevering through all of this. I mean, this is not, I can't even explain how big a deal this is. But they did it.
We just heard the news that Perseverance is alive on the surface of Mars.
Damn. Damn.
Flight will see the completion of EDL 3000.
Copy activity. That is as expected.
Whew. Thank you, Mick. This is crazy. If you got any questions, folks, hit me up in the chat. We're gonna hang out.
MRO is still seeing a strong signal from the lander.
Wow. That is incredible. All right, so let's talk about the alternate reality that it didn't succeed.
We've just heard the news that Perseverance is alive on the surface of Mars.
I think did they just get
Congratulations to the
images?
mission.
Maybe not. We'll see. Let's see.
We have some more news in. It looks like
Oh, that's that first picture. Look at that right there.
Here, take a look at the first image.
Damn, it's bound to be really dusty because the other thing is this the skycrane is rocket boosters shooting at the dusty Mars.
The target point on the map when you are ready.
Man,
We are ready on all three. Go for it.
that's awesome, Scott. Damn. All right, so our Perseverance rover is in Jezero Crater, an ancient lake bed where it's going to search for life. It's going to cache samples.
Moving in, showing you the safe zone that we've landed in.
Man, it's going to cache samples for another mission to come back. Look at that. Look at that. That's amazing.
Has just put the first image from
That's
Perseverance
amazing.
on the surface of Mars. Now it comes from the engineering
Thank you,
camera,
Keith.
known as the hazard camera.
I'm glad you joined.
This camera is mainly used to help the rover drive safely around Mars, and we will get higher
All right,
resolution
so
photos
I
later in the day.
I've talked. I keep getting interrupted by my excitement and everything that's happening on the stream. So I'm going to pause for a second here. All right, so this is a big deal for many reasons. The alternate reality where this didn't succeed would have put. There's a race going on to return a sample from Mars. It hasn't been done before. We have what seems to be a piece of, I think it's an asteroid that they found that they think came from Mars. There's obviously things that, like, maybe there was life on Mars before, and then there was an impact which sent a piece of Mars with life to Earth, and that's how it started. That is a hypothesis, an idea that could be the case. But to actually return a piece of the soil, I mean, that lets us do and know so much more about Mars than we can do by sending like a Mars science laboratory like Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity and now Perseverance to do the experiments, drill, put it up, bring it into the rover, figure out what the composition is. We can't do a lot of sample. We can't do a lot of soil. It's just not, we can't do a lot of science. We can do some science, but not a lot. Jezero Crater is huge because it's a scientifically like valuable place. Wow, look at that. That's crazy. Sorry, folks, that are just listening at this podcast afterwards. This is insane.
So you've got glass covers over these cameras, but we took these seconds after landing, so there's still dust in the air from our landing event. So this is happening. This happened just seconds ago. Just arrived, and this is really amazing.
You're welcome, Scott. I appreciate that. That been working at this for a really long time. It's what I try to do is bring a little bit something different to these broadcasts. I mean, NASA does a great job, and I think NASA's funded. They have as much funding as they have. I think if they keep doing this and providing just good, solid, it might be simplistic, but good, solid, for anyone that can just jump in and learn this stuff, it's good. I like being the supplementary to, like, hey, if you want a little bit more out of this, that's what we're here for. So thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, the alternate reality. China is doing the same thing, right? The Tianwen-1 mission, their lander is going to cache samples to be returned later. So their orbiter's already there. They're going to land in the next, few months. They're going to land in May after they do some more orbits with their orbiter, and then try the same thing. And if this mission hadn't gone well, if we hadn't landed this alternate reality, we would be out of the race. And by the way the orbits are with Mars, Earth goes around the sun every year. Mars is every 2, right? So it takes another 2 years before we have the next opportunity to get in this race. And then by that point, I mean, China could be sending their stuff back if they're successful. So this is a big moment to let this happen. We can join in here, listen a little bit. Again, if you have any questions, thank you guys for all the love in the chats. I appreciate that. It did happen. You're right, Jake. It did happen. They did send pictures. But yeah, thanks for the love. Let's check in here.
Science observation platform by putting instruments on it, and also use it as a scout for future rover missions, and then just the entry, set, and landing capability. It'll allow us to land more and more.
One thing I do want to add about what makes Perseverance different from Curiosity, on board Perseverance, it actually has the ability to make decisions on her own of like where she wants to go. If there's good terrain, if there's bad terrain, it has programs on board to automate a lot of that process to because again, right, it takes 11 minutes for a signal to go from one place to the other, from Earth to Mars, 11 minutes, and from Mars to Earth, 11 minutes. So just imagine how long it takes to send one command. It takes 22 minutes for everyone to be on the same board, right? Just to be at the same level. So you can't even think in a relative way. You have to have everything planned out. And if the rover can make decisions on its own while it's there to move around, to make this stuff happen, that is where the true value is in Perseverance, and how much better it is. Obviously, the more cameras on board are going to let us see more, and it just has multiple opportunities to cache samples as it goes around. Again, a 3D printed model here, as it goes around to these different scientifically viable areas, right? The inlet This is only a portion, I think, like a small square out of the 28-mile crater that it's in. And there's a lot of different areas in here where it may not actually be good for the rover. One of the major issues rovers have had on Mars before is that there's been wheel issues. You know, the wheels have gotten destroyed a little bit faster than they were expecting to because the terrain wasn't quite what they were expecting. And again, it's trial and error, right? I mean, once you're there, you've got to do what you can there, right? It's amazing that Spirit and Opportunity, those initial rovers, lasted as long as they did. Curiosity is still doing its thing, doing its science. Insight, they had the little mole device that was drilling in. They finally stopped that effort because they just couldn't get the mole to go deeper. It could have been that the terrain underneath, under the levels, there could have been a slab of rock that they weren't expecting. You know, this was just like a little vibrating mole that, you know, if it came up against a big rock or something, they couldn't do it. But while they were there, you know, they took the arm and they tried to push down the mole. Not something they planned for, right? They were trying to see if they could get it to get past some pebble that was in the way. I mean, if you ever dug holes for a fence, that sucks. Okay, when you're doing it by yourself, just to bring it back to the real world, back to Earth, when you're digging holes to put a fence pole into, God, that is one of the most painful things to do. And you know what it's like when you get a stone in the way, and now you've got to build the hole bigger so you can get that hole, however big that rock is. Like, imagine doing that with an 11-minute delay on what you can tell your body to do. That's what we're trying to do on Mars. So it's pretty crazy what they're able to do here. Yeah, interesting. As Scott's just saying here in the chat here, fun fact: most people who retire from NASA still come to work because they want to see what happens to the engineering they started. Yeah, I mean, space takes a really long time for progress to happen. I mean, again, like, you can only take a trip to Mars based on the tech we have now every 2 years, right? Based on just how rocket science and orbital mechanics works. Right now, it's every 2 years. That's when you have to wait, and you have to be ready in time. I mean, SpaceX has been around since the early 2000s, and they're only now starting to have the success. Their technology's finally matured to the point where they can really have all these things happen. That doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of people at NASA that stick around to see how the engineering comes from it. It's pretty wild. But this is Perseverance on Mars. So again, in Jezero Crater here. So yeah, I mean, for all the other rovers, the planning of sending that mission to Mars was all about where can we send it that it can survive, that it can still move around, and that limits a lot of the places that you're going to go, and it limits the science you're able to do there, because maybe there isn't the evidence like where Jezero Crater is, where all this water would have dried up, where if there were life, microbial life, and it would have been sifted into the inlets and outlets of the dry bed of what used to be, from what we've seen, a Mars that had water, that had tons of water, and lost it because it lost its magnetosphere. So as soon as it didn't have that anymore, the atmosphere was, we're so lucky here on Earth that we have a magnetosphere. We have something that protects us from solar radiation and solar flares. But if we got hit with a huge solar flare and it knocked out our magnetosphere, or if something happened to our core or something like that, then our atmosphere would be completely open to the vacuum of space, and any kind of space wind or anything that would be able to move those particles out of what the gravity is now the only thing holding those particles. They're very light, so now they're susceptible for movement. They could just get brushed out, and that's what seemed to have happened on Mars. It just lost its atmosphere, and now is super cold. All the water that's there is frozen, and it only gets up to like 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the hottest the planet ever gets to, but most of the time it's freezing. Looking back at the chat here, Tyler, you're very welcome for the stream. I'm glad you had the Facebook notification. I'm glad you saw it. Yeah, Yeah, let's hope that Perseverance finds our ancestors. I agree. I agree. I want to know. I want to know what the Martian Earthlings were like.
One of these missions, we make fabulous discoveries, and each one is more exciting than the last.
The future does look exciting. Now, as director of JPL, what would you like to say to those teams right now celebrating?
Oh, obviously they have earned it. Let me tell you. I mean, they have worked, for years and years on this mission, and then in the past year, of course, we had the COVID experience, and I want to thank not only the team but also all of JPL. A lot of folks had to
Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they are the best, man.
Telework, our IT systems were good enough.
They are the best.
Folks working from home, all of the folks looking at PPE and our safe distancing and reconfiguring facilities to make them safe for the employees. It's just an incredible amount of work by the entire lab, and of course, especially by this team. And and in one sense, the 7 minutes of terror are very exciting. But on the other hand,
they're over.
The mission's just started, right?
It's true. That's true. This is the first hurdle, folks, and that's what I think we'll end on. The first hurdle for Perseverance on Mars, the biggest one, I think, is over. They've landed on Mars. They've landed on the red planet. That's where it's going to be to conduct the rest of the science. I am obviously going to keep you guys up to date here on Today in Space. Thank you for joining us. If you're new here, please feel free to subscribe. Whether it's on our Facebook page, if you're watching live here, please head over to our page. Follow us there. We'll keep you updated on everything that's going on. Our Instagram, Today in Space Pod. Twitter on Today in Space Pod. Or on TikTok at Today in Space Pod as well. And of course, we're streaming on all your favorite podcast platforms. That's Spotify, that's Apple Podcasts, and of course, we're on YouTube. So subscribe there, click the bell, do all the things you got to do so you get an update when a new episode comes out. And that does so much to get the word out there. So thank you for joining us in our mission to spread love and spread science. I am your science communicator, Alex Girofanos, your space podcast host from the East Coast. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations, Perseverance team and JPL. We did it. NASA, another successful mission on Mars, showing what we can do with our technology. Be good, spread love, spread science. We'll see you next time on another episode of Today in Space.